So Brenda, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. This has been a very informative and interesting session. As noted, I work for de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited. I'm, like Linda Holden was earlier, located in Calgary, Alberta in Canada at this point. And one of the things that we're struggling with is we're looking at relocating an aerospace hub to Western Canada, which is far away from where the typical aerospace jobs have been in Canada. And so we're struggling with a significant ramp up of our production as well as our AMO activities, and looking at also long term, how do we get a workforce feed that will provide us technical expertise over the next 50 years. Because as you know, a lot of the people in Canada primarily and the United States are getting to an age where they'll be leaving the workforce in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so for us, this is a long-term solution, and we're looking at multiple streams for people coming in. And that's why we've been looking at some of the countries that are producing some of these technicians and some of these engineers and saying, you know, are there partnerships that we can enter into that will allow us to both train people who are interested in coming to Canada to work, but also leave trained skills behind? Because not only do we have an interest in supporting our own production facilities in Canada, but we have customers, obviously, that we don't want to be stealing their employees out from under them. And we want to make sure that also from a perspective of looking at when we have, when we're Sorry, I had some backfeed there. Yeah, so we're looking at both having people be able to come to Canada as well as leaving talent in country and being able to train people for our required mobile repair teams and our field service reps, which we have to place in country with our customers. And so I think the global job market, as we all know, is very, very tight for skilled people. And I think as employers, it's our obligation not to just steal the employees that are there and trained from other employers, but to work together collectively to try and build a larger pool of talent so that there isn't this continual drive for, you know, taking people from one employer to the other, which just drives up wages and doesn't create good stability for the industry. So our approach on it really is to try to work with other employers, other educational institutes, and other countries to say, how can we partner in a way that will, you know, build the labor pool, both globally and for us here in Canada, in a way that's sustainable over the next 50 years, where, you know, it's our intention to be building aircraft that long. So, you know, that's a bit of our information. I've been working a bit with Maureen, who's the ex-director of maintenance from Jambojet, on how we can participate within Kenya. And so I think that, you know, the opportunities are significant. The issues that we're facing are the ones we've heard about this morning or this afternoon, wherever we are, which are the licensing and managing to get some sort of, I don't know if it's, you know, necessarily just harmonization with licensing, but we have to find an easier way for the licensing to be recognized country to country, as opposed to what it is currently, where it's very difficult often for people to bring their license to Canada and get it recognized here. And with our immigration, unless they're a licensed mechanic, we can't necessarily apply to have them immigrate. And so there's a real catch-22 in us trying to get talent from around the globe to come to us in order to work here, when the regulations, the licensing, and the immigration has to work at the same time for us. Hi, David.
Hi there. Hi, Brenda. Yeah, you made some great comments there, and I think that's echoed throughout this symposium today. You know, we're all in this beautiful industry of ours, and we're facing these challenges. And you know, and we have offices in North America, so I completely your comments resonate very well with us. and it's exactly the same as what we find in the UK and Europe. Chuck into the mix for us Brexit and all these other issues, you know. So yeah, I'll just to introduce myself then. David Broadbridge, Operations Director, JMC Aviation, predominantly aviation recruitment business. In fact, we don't do any other sector. We are all aviation. I'm an ex-structural technician, 20 years, worked in 17 countries across Europe, Middle East, Asia, and Australasia. And for the last 17 years, I've been in aviation recruitment in one guise or another. And I think, you know, our industry is always the first to get hit by any pandemic, be that the Gulf War in my time, Gulf Wars, financial crashes, COVID, always the first industry to get hit and the last one to come out. And every time it happens, we lose so many skilled guys, you know, and it's you know, to either taking early retirement, they're retraining to, you know, transferable skill sectors, and so on. And couple that with the fact that I think if you go back to the mid-80s when I done my training, and I'm sure Brenda and all you other guys have find this, when I did my training back in the mid-80s, there was 50, 60 of us every year, trainees going through. And I noticed over the years that went down to single figures. Big companies did not invest, not just big companies, but all aviation companies, because we are really a small family in aviation on a global scale. And, you know, they stopped investing in the training. And I believe we're now aware of it. And it will take us quite a number of years to actually get back up to where we should be with that. So what you say there, Brenda, about working together, not robbing Peter to pay Paul, you know, is definitely the right way. And yeah, we have so many regulatory restrictions, be it the licensing, we have immigration, political influences. You know, all these are restrictions that are out of our control. And I think it is an education piece on the licensing, but trying to have discussions with EASA, CASA, ICAO, and Transport Canada. I'm sure they're all the same. It's very, very difficult to change. I think Linda mentioned earlier on in this meeting that not since the 1990s have Transport Canada changed their curriculum. I mean, it's a business that moves that slowly to affect change is very difficult. So what can we do? You know, I mean, JMC, we have a number of key customers. I mean, we've got 7 offices, mainly in Europe and North America. We've worked on 5 continents. We deliver 2 million man hours globally, all on contract or subcontract basis. So we supply the manpower for the likes of the Havilland, you know, when they've got their peaks and troughs. But now we've got to all work closer together. You know, the collaboration is such a key word, I feel, that cannot be overemphasized on what we need to do to affect the changes. And we have been taking manpower, skilled guys that have wanted to come and work in Europe, you know, from Kenya, Ethiopia, Southeast Asia, and it's a positive in one way that the guys come and they learn, and that in a way, I think from what they learn whilst working with us in different locations, it fast tracks their experience. But ultimately, they will return home. But what we need to understand is how we can retain this service there, but also satisfy the demands of our customer base. So I think that the training school that you mentioned, Brent, I think is a brilliant one. We've structured training courses to cross-trade mechanics to structural to composite. As one of the speakers said earlier, the new age aircraft are 60-70% composite base. So this cross training is key as well, because we cannot just keep finding new guys. It's utilizing to the maximum of what we've got. So yeah, I really would like to continue this discussion with anyone who wants to contact me afterwards on how we can all work together, quite honestly, to tackle the issues that we face. And also I can give some insight into the challenges that we have faced by the global mobilization of manpower, be that cultural or experience of how they present themselves on their resumes, CVs, so on. So yeah,
And one of the other things, David, as you talk about the cross-training, one of the things we're trying to do to avoid the losing people during downturns is cross-train them between our parts manufacturing, our assembly plants, and our AMO, so that we can have a fluid workforce that moves back and forth. And that way, if there is dips in one business, we can move them and use them in another business. And it's, you know, it's a big investment and it's fair, you know, it's a fair bit of money, but I think it's the only way we're going to retain them during those downturns.
Definitely. I mean, you know, Brenda, what I find as well, because you're in both elements of it, you're in the AMO and the manufacturer sectors, and the same, we support those customer types here in Europe and in North America, is you find that we have, let's say the manufacturer, we have a lot of good guys that work in manufacture that have AMO experience. Mm-hmm. But the focus in that in the manufacturer will be just what they can do there for them, and it's that education piece, it's that keeping their skill set current, and that ability then, as you say, to move efficiently between the sectors subject to the demands. Because another thing that we all know in this industry, the demand is never like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just to jump in, and I want to thank both of you for coming in for this particular symposium. Brenda, David, I know I've been working very closely with the two organizations, and I'm happy that I've brought you together during this symposium so we can all share our experiences and the challenges that we're facing. And what I'm looking out for is a way that we can be able, since we're looking at the global demand, and it's important, just like Brenda, you're saying you're ramping up. And I think from JMC angle as well, it's very difficult for you to lay your hands on the number of skilled manpower that you want right across Europe. Mm-hmm. And even when you get out to Africa, when you're looking at the skill set that we're looking for, a lot of times we can interview big numbers and only end up taking very few. So that clearly indicates to us that we need to align our training to the demands of the industry. We tend to train a lot. We have a lot of people who are trained, but these numbers are not actually, we are not filling the numbers when it comes to the industry. We have trained a lot, but it doesn't impact the way the organizations out here would need to fill the numbers that are leaving the training institutions. So my take in this situation with the experience I've had is, how do we align the training to be practical with the tasks that the people are coming to handle once they come to the industry? If you're looking at people who are going to do the fitting, if you're looking at the people who are going to do the structural repairs, then they do not need to go through understanding the aircraft systems. I know we are talking about cross-functional, but we can be able to look at the people doing structures and looking at building the components and the equipment, maybe the ground service equipments and all those, so that we limit the scale and we can reduce the training time to be practical with what we're going to use them. So I'm glad that we're here today. I'm having feedback.
Yeah, I think both that the transition into the real tasks, as well as the ability for employers to understand the requirement to take them and do the on-the-job training. You know, it's so often that everybody wants the experienced people. We have to be able to take a number of inexperienced apprentices into the industry on a regular basis in order to build that capacity, as opposed to just going out during peaks and hoping to hire 100 experienced people. And so, you know, we're really looking at a long-term workforce and how do we build and cross-train that workforce in order to keep them busy all the time, but also, you know, how do we drip people in on a regular basis so that we're continually building up the workforce as opposed to trying to overload it with 100 new people at a time.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting question that has come up where we're looking at, I think the question, I just didn't want to read it off, but just to, you know, like zero in on what the person is asking, is that we have trained personnel in Africa who are working on the aircrafts that have been manufactured either in the US or in Europe or in Canada. And the trained manpower in Africa is actually working on these particular equipment. But then you find that because of regulations, then we cannot necessarily have the manpower who are trained in Africa fit into the global market, really just because they are blocked from a regulatory point of view. The knowledge of the equipment is the same, the aircraft is the same, so we do know that they have what it takes to be able to fix the aircraft. So how is it, and I think this is a discussion that we need to bring in the regulators and maybe look at ICAO, because ICAO came up with a standardized way of making sure that the examinations are at a given level. But so once these people take these examinations and they meet the ICAO standard, then we should be able to have a global agreement that once you're licensed under ICAO standard, then you should be able to be allowed to operate or to be able to work in the different jurisdictions, because the equipment remains the same. So that means the knowledge is the same. So I think we just need to be able to bring on board the regulators and the government, of course, the political, the political will to make this industry move, because I think that's where the clog is. And if we can be able to move that, then we should be able to see a lot of things working, and then we can standardize, work together and standardize. It would take a different angle when we're looking at the OEMs, when you're looking at the different organizations, like globally. How do we push in the money? I know we have seen World Bank projects helping the different countries to be able to up their game. But how do we now, within the industry players, how can we come at our own level, come together, see how we can be able to come up with a training institution, whether it's for structures, and come up with an agreed standard that can be able to allow us then to use the people, or move the actual facilities within the places where we have the numbers, and therefore then get the product we want in the location we want at the price that we want, to manage it all. But that would be my take. I don't know what you people think, maybe from JMC and from the Havilland as well, and maybe other organizations that are sitting in here with us. Yeah.
Maureen, as we probably let Brenda and David internalize this, I also want to bring in Professor Tilmann, who's just joined.
Yes.
And as Tilmann comes in, maybe Brenda, you could probably just click on the question button and see one or two questions that have come up sent to David, and pretty much maybe what we've discussed, and some of them we can probably share answers later. So, Prof, if you are able, please just come in. Okay, Prof, whenever you're ready, just let us know. Maybe Brenda, you want to say something as we wait for Prof?
Well, I think to Maureen's comment, the only way we're going to be able to do this is if we do it collectively as training institutions, as employers, as end customers that have the aircraft, as as governments. We need to get a collective group and a collective voice in order to move this forward, and the right people out of the right governments around immigration issues and licensing issues, because we try to do it on our own all the time, but we don't get very far. I think it has to be a concerted effort. And I think if we don't do it now, we're going to find ourselves in even worse trouble in 10 years from now.
The mic seems to work now.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Good. Professor Tilmann, maybe you can come in now, and we will again come back to David as we wrap up on the questions.
I assumed I cannot. Can I share my screen here? Program. I share my. All of the points you made, Brenda and David, and also Maureen. What's her name? The lady. We are at a very different stage that you're discussing. The issue is not that we have all these regional issues. aviation is global, and so many people don't understand it. There are still micro schools with very old material, very old equipment, as we heard in the last couple of presentations, while the market is asking for a global employee, a globally trained expert. We have worked the last 5 years. I have a terrible feedback here, but I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me, guys? Yeah. And I have beautiful slides that can prove my point. Also, where we need people globally, and how many we need, and also where we have to go in terms of this global emphasis. Africans, they are from Kenya or from Ethiopia or from Nigeria or from wherever in Africa, are global employees of the future. We have none in Europe, in Canada, and the US. We are stagnant in our growth. We have a dramatic decrease in the interest in aviation because there are many other jobs and industries looking for employees as well. And we have a growth of 20 or so % of manpower in Africa. And here we're concentrating on having little island schools in Kenya, in Dar es Salaam, and wherever. We need institutions that are based on the new competency-based training and assessment, Annex 1. And we need to have one standard education. Forget the US maybe, but Canada, I hope, will go for some EASA standard, or I should say the ICAO standard, because ICAO has finally, under the new leadership, come to a very clear directive of getting international aviation standardized, and that's what we started with Annex 1, and that will continue. So we have two things. We have a huge employee availability in Africa. We have almost no institutions in Africa. We have no MROs in Africa. We have Ethiopian, we have Kenya Airways in a way, but very small, and all have very little training environment. So we need to get much more focused on having institutions in Africa centralized that are not government run, because governments in Africa don't have money. I see that in Nigeria, where I started the first African Aviation Aerospace University as Vice Chancellor. I have to say it is all limiting if we are going with government, and every country in Africa wants to have his school, his university, his whatever airline, and so on. This is not leading to what we need. They will here and there produce one pilot and 10 pilots and 10 engineers, and they will be gone in a heartbeat, because everywhere else they're needed desperately. Bonding, forget bonding. I'm with this bonding issue since 40 years, since I'm in this industry. Never worked. Every judge will immediately shut you down if you as an employer try to bond somebody more than a year, even if he has cost you $100,000 for a complete ATPL or whatever. This is a toolkit. You buy an AMP Mechanica toolkit for $10,000, $5,000, whatever it is. Well, you want to fly your aircraft, you have to pay $100,000 for a pilot. And that's how easy it is. We have to find ways to make this a very central global issue and understand aviation, both pilots and engineers, as global employees. And the more we need them, the easier for them it will get to get residence permits and whatever it is needed. So this, you all know how many people we need to get this industry going, how much retirement we have. I have beautiful slides for that. And this is where you have to stop emphasizing, and I'm sorry to tell you that, emphasizing that every little country in Africa, and I'm of course somewhat ridiculing it, these are 1.4 and soon 2 billion people. 1.4 will be the number in a couple of years. While Europe is stagnating, I don't know about Canada, is probably also kind of stagnating. This is where we have to really change our mindset. And ICAO is coming there and is driving that. So sorry for being a little blunt there.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And bonding, I agree. Bonding is not enforceable really legally, but us also as an employer, if an employee doesn't want to stay with you, do you really want that employee working in your site? I think, we've taken bonding right out of our agreements, irrespective of the cost of the training for them, because, we think people should be free to go where they want. And if they want to stay with us, they should be staying with us for the right reasons.
Exactly. And, and of course, you're right. If you want to keep an employee, you have to have a culture, you have to have a just culture, as we say, and you have to make them happy. And that is also misunderstood in many African airlines. We are whatever, a Nigerian airline, and we can pay only 5,000 for a pilot a month. There is a global job and there's a global pay structure. You can forget having your own local pay structure. And when you need pilots, you get contract pilots. I'm not sure if David is in that, but contract pilots cost the global standard payment plus 30% because those agents want to live as well. And they are making 30% more than the average payment in the world. And here are some locals who are making 50% or even less. I had that also in India. I had that everywhere, where these smart guys try to get low-cost employees or have budgets that budget on low-cost employees. They are in aviation no more low-cost employees, whether they're from the poorest quarters in Africa or the rich quarters in where you're coming from, Calgary or whatever. It is the same price. And once industries have understood, our industry has understood it, we're much better off. We're concentrating on what we need to do to fill those empty slots. We need 600,000 pilots in the next 20 years and 600,000 engineers. They are more or less equal. And then with the university, with the marrying of BSc and MSc degrees, we're getting what we have missed for 70 years in aviation industry, to get an academic perspective also into this job, because it is no longer flying an aircraft or repairing an aircraft. You have to give people perspectives, and as you said, Brenda, they should have alternative career aspects as well, because as for me, the lifelong in a cockpit is not really the career goal that I wanted to have and that many others want to have. And on top of it, we need managers. We have two little managers who are really skilled in aviation. Anyway, that's right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah. So we all are in agreement that we really need to focus on training large numbers and training with the competency that we will need to have. And I think from this discussion, we are at a good place to know that we need to involve everybody to be able to give us the training facilities that we require. And I'm glad that we all recognize the fact that the numbers to train are really sitting in Africa, and we can be able to do it. It takes the will, and it takes us to be able to push the people who need to be in here in these discussions to get us going. So I think that will be our take as we leave. How then do we involve the people who we need to have on board to make the right decisions and to invest in the things that we need to push the money into. So I like what you say, Professor, and I agree. And I think that was the main reason that we decided that this symposium is very important, so that all stakeholders, right from the operators, from the AMO, to the trainers, to the manufacturers, and then the regulators. Unfortunately, today we only had KCAA. Would have loved to have FAA, would have loved to have TCA, would have loved to have had EASA in here. And I think that's what we're going to try and do in our next symposium, so that we have the decision makers and the people who know that they are the stamping box in getting us to where we want to be as an industry. So, and this actually makes us roll us over to the next plenary discussion. Jared, I give it over to you, which is very important because we're looking at financing, personal training, and I think that should be the next one, Jared, if I'm not wrong.
Maureen, we actually tried, in the interest of time, to merge the two together.
Okay.
And so if you look at it keenly, we've had the panelists in both, so we could probably just
So maybe then if we can bring in Krista, so that she can be able to bring in her view, because we've had a lot of discussions with her before, and we were looking at what are the avenues. The bottom line is really the same thing. How do we bring every stakeholder? How do we bring the people who need to invest in this space so that we can be able to have the right numbers, the right competencies sitting in the right places so that we can stabilize these operations and stabilize aircraft maintenance. It's key for us as we are going. Otherwise, we're going to start seeing safety compromise, quality compromise, a lot of things that can go wrong if we do not have the right people with the right skill, with the right numbers in the right place to do what they need to do. So I'm glad.
Yes, Maureen, we are way past time. I just want to give it back to panelists. If there's any of the questions here that you probably want to give a straight answer, if not, we're gonna put them together and share with each and every panelist questions regardless. And so, I don't know, Brenda, you have anything to give immediately?
Look forward to continuing the conversation. I think it's a critical one, and it's not one that we can have in this short framework.
Oh, okay. And on the side of David, if there's any question on your part, I see quite a number.
No, not at this stage.
Well, so Maureen, I'll bring it back to you, and David Kithure is also here. We're just there for summarize and calls a day. Really, it's been long. It's all day.
Yeah. Okay, I think for me is to really, really thank everybody in here who came in. It's it was a very, very important session, and I think it has left us all very informed, and we also have the perspective of the different people, the challenges that we're facing, and I think it's very clear in our minds on what should be our next steps if we want to see a better industry in terms of the manpower development and in terms of just making sure that we are standardized with the competencies that we want to see across. I like what Professor Tilmann said. This is really, we are dealing with a global employee. And for that reason, we have to think and address these particular skills as a global employee. We need to develop them looking out on what the globe needs and where we are going as an industry globally. And I also like the challenge that you're giving us. And I think one of the things that I saw when I was looking at the different institutions that we have, right from Tanzania to the Kenyan institutions to TUK and to EASA, what was crossing my mind, what stops us from running programs that we can be able to utilize the equipment that we already have in the region to give the trainees the competency that we want to see? Collaborative effort, and can we be able to work together? It takes the willpower, it takes strong decision making and the right people sitting in the right rooms to be able to get this going. So I think we need to escalate it, because I can see there's a lot of investment that has gone in here, and maybe improvements that we may want to see, and focus on bringing our resources together to get us to acquire what it is that is going to give us the difference we want to see. And so for that, we will try as a committee that assembled this discussion to see how we can reach out, and with the help of the other panelists, on how we can get to the next step, involve the regulators as much as we can, and also bring in the different governments and government institutions to be on board this particular discourse and find a way forward. So with that, I would ask David to give his closing remarks so that we can call it a day.
Thank you, Maureen, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll just refer to my notes so that I don't miss anything important. A few minutes recap on some of the key highlights of what we discussed this evening. For some, I know it's morning. So it's been an incredible day here at the Aviation Careers Symposium 2024. I'd like to start by thanking each and every one of you what I can see, we still have 120 people logged in. So starting from the chairpersons, the Maureen's, the Jared, the one opening remark, as well as the welcome message, to the enlightening and address by Professor Ian. I don't know if Professor Ian is still here. We have delved deep into the past and future of aviation certification, industry insights, certification processes, and even discussed the aviation careers. We had the privilege of hearing from esteemed panelists in our first panel discussion. This included Madam Wandera Kweyu from Jambojet, Linda Holden from Said, and Nitya from India, who provided us with invaluable insight on the gaps in the current job market. High demand, the lengthy staff development period, the issues on mobility and conversion, and the lack of standardization thereof. And some of the suggestions, of course, that came from this panel included the need for aircraft training schools to adopt new technology for the new airplanes, and also to train on soft skills and to partner with employers, especially the airlines. We had a certification and licensing workshop on AML certification processes from Mr. Alex Kithure from our Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, and he was able to walk us through the KCA process of certification and what they're planning ahead to elevate the standards of the Kenyan Civil Aviation Authority to global standards. Similarly, we had insights from Jared Ajuanga and Ms. Vanessa on the FAA, the EASA, Transport Canada, and the GCA process that they have on the ground. And we are able to hear some of the real world success stories from Vanessa and from Mr. Ben Benzi. Thanks for sharing those interesting stories. And from hearing, listen to Vanessa, we hear that AI is now coming to the cockpit. Artificial intelligence is coming to the cockpit, aircraft maintenance, and we need to be prepared for this. In the technology showcase session, we had insight from the regional aircraft training institution. We had the privilege of hearing from the Starting School of Aviation, Havilland from Germany, NIT from Tanzania, Technical University of Kenya, and thanks to Mr. Marete, Mr. Lawrence, Dr. Mgaya, and Professor Samia for sharing on your institution. On the financial aid and scholarships, we've heard from Brenda from the Havilland, David from JMC UK, and the discussion actually provoked a lot of excitement from attendees, and there are many questions on how you can sponsor local B1 and B2 classes. I believe that's something we need people like to hear a response on. And thanks to Professor Tilmann for the presentation on the global job market and for clarifying what was insinuated by many of us, that the nature of the aviation job market is actually global, and there's really need for stakeholders to work together to address the problem as a global issue. It's not an isolated country issue, regional issue. This is a global issue, and the skills they are migrating from one region to another, and there's a need for all stakeholders to look at harmonizing the training standards, regulations, and even remuneration structures for this industry. As we reflect on the discussions today, it's clear that the future of aviation maintenance requires continuous learning, adapting to technological advances, especially the new airplanes, harmonizing standards and regulations, and collaboration between industry and training institutions. I would like to extend a special thank you to all our speakers, panelists, presenters for their time and effort in making this event a success. I'd also want to acknowledge our organizing committee, including Madam Maureen Okomo, Jared Ajwanga, Benny Benzi, Matthias Chesoli, Mohammed Mahat, and others, without whom this symposium would not have been possible. Thanks a lot for your hard work behind the scenes, putting this together and preparing everyone for this session today. To our attendees, we do appreciate your active participation and the many questions that you've raised on the wall, and this shall be attended to. We hope that you found today's symposium both informative and inspiring. Please stay tuned for follow-up materials and follow us on our social media pages for updates. So our social media handles on the website at the bottom, you're going to see our Twitter and Facebook handles, and we shall be posting material on this session and future sessions. Do not hesitate to reach out to us for any further inquiries or networking opportunities. Once again, thank you all, and we look forward to continued engagement in building a brighter future for the aircraft maintenance industry. Have a great evening all, or a great day, and God bless.